Okay, here's another interesting project. This project is to see if some of the equations that we use in physics really work. In this case, we're studying projectile motion. I want to see if I can calculate the distance that a projectile will travel with accuracy. So in order to do this, I built this projectile launcher. Now, what I did with this launcher is I made some experimental measurements. One of the things I determined was the stretch of the spring, and through that I could determine the spring constant. The other thing that I could measure is the mass of the projectile carriage along with the mass of the projectile, this little ball over here. Knowing these two things, we could do the calculation and we could see how far this should travel in the horizontal direction. So first we need to determine the spring constant, and again we can measure the force over the amount of stretch to get that. That's an experimental measurement. Then we need to determine the mass of the carriage and the projectile, another experimental measurement. And finally we need to determine the angle at which the projectile will be fired, and that's another thing that we can measure. Then we just do a couple of calculations. We determine the total energy, the total potential energy, using the spring equation. In this case, since the spring isn't totally relaxed, we have to take the total energy minus the remaining energy. And from that we can determine the velocity using this equation over here. And from that we can determine the horizontal distance traveled. Okay, now again we did the measurements up here, and you can see where they are. We converted them to MKS units, and we did the calculations down here. And it turned out to be around 65 inches. And I say around because there's measurement error, etc. So it's ballpark 65 inches, probably plus or minus half an inch. And with that, we can do the actual experiment and see if this works. Now let's see if reality matches the math. Will the projectile really travel 65 inches? Let's see. Why don't we do the shooting first? All right, this is a projectile launcher built of various parts lying around, mostly Lego pieces. And let's see how it goes. Ooh, a little off to the side. Ooh, right in. Oh, perfect. Okay, ready? Oh, perfect shot. I would say that calculation is pretty much on the money.